So let's switch over here, and we can talk about them. Okay, so I have the Shaman on the left and the Druid on the right. Let's talk about the Druid first, since I think a lot of people are pretty familiar with this deck, but I figured we'd just go over it since, again, like, you've been playing it and probably seen articles on it, but it's the Watcher version of this, right?
Yeah.
Can you explain just, I guess, the difference? The Watchers are the main difference, so explain why the Watchers are a really important component to this.
Well, like basically in this meta, you have to really respect Hunter a lot. Like you've kind of seen, hopefully you've seen some of the ESGN games, but
Yeah.
you really have to respect the class right now. Like it's a class that's kind of warping the meta game, where you need to do something to respect it. And originally what I did to kind of respect it was just add in Sun Fury. Um, but as you add in, Sun Furies, and I also believe I had like one Defender of Argus, and pretty much every Druid is already using two Keepers, which is another way to activate Watcher. So, like, as you add in all these things, you're already so close to being able to use Watchers like efficiently for free. You know what I mean? Since
Yeah.
you already have two Sun Furies and one Argus, and maybe two Keepers. So at that point, you might as well just add in the last Argus and the two Watchers, because if you do have ways to activate Watchers, nobody can deny that it's strong, because it's a 2 mana for a 4/5. The problem with Watchers, you need ways to activate it. Another thing is, you can, like, since you already have to like respect Hunter so much, even the version with Sun Furies without Watchers, they need other ways to respect Hunter, and those other ways are stuff like Claw and the Earthen Ring Farseer. So if you do go ahead and add in Watchers, you can just take out the claws and the Earthen Ring Farseers.
Yeah.
So it's probably stronger against other stuff as well, because those cards aren't exactly great against most things. They're kind of there to buffer your HP against Hunter, and if you have Watchers, then you're going to take less damage anyway, so you can go
Mm-hmm.
greedier on having less claws and Earthen Ring Farseers.
Yeah. Definitely cool things added, I guess, to what you were doing. Do you see any other things, or maybe some things that you're experimenting with to really enhance this? Because this deck is so refined at this point, in my opinion. I'm just
I
wondering if
had
there's
some
more.
I had some big breakthroughs on
Hmm.
like what I found was good. I mean, the deck I believe that's on the stream right now is the one I'm playing right now, but
Hmm.
that's after I've already found out. But one of the things that was really
Cool.
interesting to me was the fact that I don't think Blood Mage is good. I've always thought it was crazy not to use Blood Mage in these decks,
Hmm.
but now I agree with some other people that it's not good. Um, I mean, Blood Mage is incredibly good in Druid. Like in the deck, Blood Mage is very good. The reason why you don't want to use Blood Mage is because it pretty much just conflicts too much on your mana curve. Because when you're using Watchers, you have already a ton of 2 drops, because you have two Sun Furies, two Watchers, and then you have the mandatory Nat Pagle in every deck. So that's
Yeah.
already 5. And I'm not sure if there's any more, but I think there's only 5. But 5 is a lot of 2 drops already, especially as Innervate, where you don't even need as many 2 drops, because if you count Innervate as a 2 drop, technically a 2 drop, where you can push like some of your 4 drops as your 2 drops. That's like 7 things you can do on turn 2, even if you count the Innervate. So
Hmm.
it's like, even though Blood Mage is good to combo later, say on turn 6 with Swipe or any time with Wrath,
Yeah.
um, you're losing like half the benefit of the card, which is it being a 2 drop. And if you are trying to just go bigger, like higher mana, you'd kind of rather hit the real mana curve instead of relying on 2 small cards as a combo. It's
Hmm.
not as reliable, and it's probably not as strong.
Okay.
Although
So,
Blood Mage
so
Swipe was really
so
strong.
a Blood Mage replacement, I guess, is the addition.
Well, that's another thing. Like that's why
Mm.
I kind of like Cenarius and Rag, because if you are going to like late game, like turns 8 and 9 and stuff, where you can cast Cenarius and Ragnaros, um, they are quite a bit stronger than casting like 2 4 drops. It's just the fact that the 4 drops have more potential early. Like if you think about something like a Chillwind Yeti and an Azure Drake. That's a pretty good way to compare it, right? Because a Chillwind Yeti and an Azure Drake is 2 cards, but since the Azure Drake is a cantrip, I believe it's costing you a net like 1 card compared to like the Cenarius, which is 1 card. So you get
Okay.
a 4/5 and a 4/4, and I guess with spell power, and the same you use the same amount of cards as Cenarius for 9 mana, but Cenarius is a 5/8 and the 2 taunters, and I think that's a fair bit stronger. So, like if you are actually making it up to the really high mana curves, I believe it's probably better to cast one of the big cards than multiple little cards, especially since if you're not even counting like the Azure Drake, you're just talking about 2 Yetis, that actually costs you 1 more card, that because
Yeah,
the 9
yeah.
top is only 1 card. So.
Trump, any thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I'm quite amazed at how much this Druid deck has progressed and been refined. There are like, I really enjoyed that explanation of Blood Mage Thanos by
Hmm.
StrifeCro because
Yeah.
I am one of the old school thoughts that it is insane not to run the Blood Mage here. I think it's still a possibility. I mean, there's still little bits and pieces to me like you could easily make this more anti-aggro, you could make this more anti-control. Right now it's a nice
Mhm.
balance, which is
Yeah.
yeah.
And Rat, like one of the most important match, because like Warrior Control is actually kind of making a comeback. Like it's pretty
Yeah.
popular now,
Hmm.
and Ragnaros is like insanely good against Warrior Control. Just because like you're almost never gonna kill them that fast, just because of the sheer amount of like armoring up they do. Like the shield block, their hero power. Like
Yeah.
sometimes you're just not gonna kill them by turn 10, and if you're gonna get that late, like stuff like Ragnaros and Cenarius is really good. Like I've actually killed Alexstrasza's with Ragnaros's, Groms with Ragnaros's. So it's like
Hmm.
it's so efficient if you're killing something like that, and then you're leaving behind an 8/8. It's a
So
good burst as well. Even if they don't have a creature, you do 8 damage to the face, almost like a pyroblast for eight
mhm.
mana, and they still have to kill the Ragnaros. So.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, for a while, right? This deck, when you had Blood Mage in it, I think Cenarius and Rag were being kind of inter switched. I think later on, I think Rag was there and Cenarius wasn't.
Yeah, I kind of shifted like the
Hmm.
like that stuff upward because like a part of the reason why you're running Blood Mage is because you're trying to keep your hand robust, because it's a cantrip. Like after you play it, maybe with a spell or just when it like just by itself, it dies and you draw another card. So
Hmm.
it's really there to buffer your hand size, keeping your hand big. But it's having just more like high mana cards does the same thing. That's kind of what I figured out. Just
Ah, I
having
see.
more cards at high mana is like the same thing, and it's stronger once you kind of get there.
Yeah, no, that's interesting. Yeah, I didn't actually. That's actually a great explanation. I always wondered because I always thought that Cenarius seemed to be more in line with, I guess, the design of the mid range type of deck. Where you're just like you got those solid mid range units, and they're going to be on the board for a while, just because you have the Yetis and you have the ancient lores, Innervate and that sort of thing. And Cenarius with the 2/2 buff seemed to be maybe in line with that. Not necessarily just you have the option
Mhm.
of having the
Yeah,
two units or
yeah,
not,
yeah.
and
I mean, the
so that
main
was going to be
form of
interesting.
Cenarius, you're still mostly casting the treants,
Yeah,
but yeah, it's a good like second option if you have the right situation,
yeah, yeah.
because it's actually fairly rare for you to have that many creatures and then by like that like turn 9 where you can actually get a good bloodlust. But like almost all the time, I find when I do cast Cenarius is for the treants. But
Hmm.
almost any time I have 2 creatures out, I'll choose the bloodlust instead because well, I just call it a bloodlust, but it's like the buff. But
Yeah,
it's because like the bloodlust effect has like haste. Like you get those 2 creatures can attack right away already. So
yeah,
whereas the treants, they can't attack. I mean, obviously, sometimes you really want the taunts, like reverse aggro, so then
yeah. It's
do the
great against
taunters on
aggro,
treants.
actually.
Yeah.
All right, so is there more innovation coming to it? I didn't quite catch it because you did say you talked about Blood Mage, and Blood Mage isn't
Honestly, I haven't
in here.
changed that deck in like 3 weeks. It's
Okay,
like the card for card, the exact same.
okay.
So I haven't been finding any ideas on how I could change it.
Hmm.
I mean, there's different Druid decks, but they're like I think this one is really well refined already for like mid range watchers. Like the other concepts are
Yeah.
something like if you want to go Power of the Wild, there's a whole other deck, or like a Druid control deck, let's say.
Yeah,
But
absolutely. I
as
mean,
far as like this mid-range Watcher type, I think it's fairly close to as good as I can think to make it. Maybe
it's got
some
to be
people
one of
can
the
do
most,
better.
if not the most refined deck that we have in the metagame right now, because it's gone through iterations. It's gone through like 4
Yeah.
iterations, I think. So, really, really cool. Really, really actually cool to see the process of it too, and having you explain it is amazing. Let's talk about the Shaman deck you got here. And Shaman, I feel like, is on the rise. Maybe even gotten to the top now, but it's definitely been had a huge influx this season in particular, and it's kind of been coming, in my opinion. I mean, the Shamans always had such versatile abilities with the cards, so I'm not surprised. But talk about this one.
Well, I mean, I talked about a little bit before, right? How like basically, I guess originally, like the first time I was kind of introduced to Shaman this patch was like Savage's Shaman. I guess I don't know, maybe some
Yeah,
doghouse version or whatever. Basically, it's the one that we all played because we actually played that deck in Fight Night. It aired yesterday, so it's not a spoiler because I believe I played it yesterday. But I just copied their deck. I mean, there's no way for us to make 6 decks in one day, so I just literally copied their deck on the second day, and
wait, were you
and
guys
yeah,
sharing
that's
decks?
well, no, you
Or
can see what their decks are after the game, basically,
oh, okay,
because
okay,
I
got
mean
it,
you
got
can
it.
see them play it, right?
Oh, you mean like the second and third days? Yeah, okay, gotcha.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
And then yeah, I thought I talked about some of the weaknesses of the deck, but I thought that um, just having a lot of slow cards like Karn and stuff isn't that great because you're always dying around turn 10 no matter what versus Hunter and maybe even some other aggro decks that are just burning you out. Like you have no
Right.
healing, not like Druid. So I mean you're also kind of weak to Unleash the Hounds because the nature of the Shaman Hero ability. You're just making more totems. So you really have to adjust a lot to be able to beat hunters. Like, I mean, I guess you could just say forget it. I just lose a hunter and I just maybe do extra good against other things. But I've never kind of liked that style. Where I kind of like to make all my decks like playable against everything, and if it's not playable or like relatively playable against everything, I don't really like it that much.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe you could have a better matchup against, let's say, Warrior or something, Warrior Control, if you do use Karn and stuff. But I kind of adjusted to be more mid range, where I could really like build up, totems early game, and then maybe around turns 5 to 6 start really putting on the pressure.
Right.
And it's really bursty. Like you can do 25 damage in one turn. So
Yeah, yeah, with the Wind Fury and and
you just need the right cards. Yeah.
exactly.
But I've
Trump.
made like some changes throughout. Like the Gadgetzan was a good change, like a good thing. Just because Shaman's using so many 1 mana spells, I believe like 6 at this point, like Lightning
Yeah.
Bolt, Rockbiter, and Earthshock. That's all 6, and so it's like in a lot of the matchups where you find that there's not a great target for those spells, like say Warrior Control.
Yeah.
Like they don't really have any creatures a lot of times, so all your Lightning Bolts are just in Rockbiter just sitting in your hand, and then if that does happen later on, and then you draw a Gadgetzan,
Yeah.
or already had a Gadgetzan, you can just cycle them all on their face.
Yeah. Trump, what do you think of this stuff? Any interesting interesting things you see, or maybe things that you think would be maybe cool to add to it?
All right. Well, the simplest. Cons- I tend to lean towards the more greedy style side, so
Yeah.
you would see me add the Cairn into it. You would see me probably take out the Wind Fury, put in an Alakir, moving the curve a bit higher. But I don't disagree with StrifeCro's thoughts about the Shaman and how how long-term control might be on the weak side. So I lean towards Strife's judgment on this, and I'd have to try out other things. But I do think this Shaman deck can be test out some more. Maybe some cards would change,
Yeah. Also,
etc.
Yeah.
this one is not refined. Like if the Druid is refined, this one is not. Like I do make changes quite a bit as I play Shaman, like all the time, and trying stuff out.
Yeah.
So this one is just not refined at all.
Talk about the Argent Commanders.
Well, a lot of shamans with Windfury, they're actually using Leroy. But I found that with Leroy, it kind of hurts the consistency of your deck a lot because if they're not low enough, then you pretty much can't use Leroy, like unless you use it to the last hit. I mean, this is not exactly true. I mean, obviously you can use Leroy for other things, but as a general thing, like Leroy isn't that great unless you're killing them the turn you cast it, because it's leaving behind the whelps. There's some cool things you can do, maybe Leroy Lightning Storm or something, but like generally, like you almost always see Leroy being the final spell you cast, and if you're not actually getting them that low, where like they have a decent early game where controlling your totems, killing your fire elementals, then you start running low on cards, and your hand is like Leroy or something. It's kind of weird. I mean, to some extent, Wind Fury has this same problem, but Wind Fury is Wind Fury. I took out Alakir for Wind Fury, so it kind of replaced that slot, like the big burst slot. So it's not that bad for that, but also Wind Fury is actually cyclable with Gadgetzan, meaning like even if I'm not in kill range, if I have a Gadgetzan out and maybe like anything to Wind Fury, I'll just go ahead and Wind Fury like a 4/4, like the Gadgetzan itself if it survives, and then I'll just hit him for 8 and it still cycles it. So I think it's a lot. I think it's probably better than Leroy because if you can only have one, like you're not willing to go too gimmicky, then I think it's stronger because of the synergy with Rockbiter and Flame Tongue Totem. Like you can actually Leroy anything. I mean, not Leroy, Wind Fury anything. Because if people are only trying to combo with Leroy, it's not like Fire Elemental's even smaller than Leroy. It's the same thing. It's 6 attack. So any kind of burst you can get with Leroy, Rockbiter weapon, you can get with Fire Elemental Rockbiter weapon if it sticks around one turn. So
yeah.
Oh yeah, the original question was Argent Commander, but
yes,
it's kind of like I felt like the commanders were a more solid way to provide the burst and that kind of style because you're a mid-range deck, so you are trying to get in damage like around turns 4 to 6 and stuff. So I think Argent is just really solid. Like I just never feel sad when I play Argent. Like it always does what it's advertising.
right,
it always like kills like a 4/4, like does 4 damage to something and then sticks around, and it actually does better than that if they don't have any creatures and you just punch them in the face, because then it doesn't even lose the Divine Shield, and then they have to. It's really hard to deal with it after. So,
Trump, you felt like it looked like you wanted to maybe interject there. Did you have a?
Yeah, I mean, I like the Argent Commander in this deck. It's especially good because you run 2 Flame Tongue Totem, and you also have the Wind Fury, so that makes the charging things naturally better.
One thing that's missing that I know a lot of people either really feel strongly about or just really like the card is Mana Tide Totem. Is that kind of interchangeable with Nat Pagal here, or do you just not like that card at all?
I think Mana Tide Totem is. I mean, Nat Pagal is just on a whole other level.
Yeah,
than
Nat
Mana Tide
Pagal's
Totem.
amazing.
So I mean, I have played. Well, in every iteration of Shaman I've played, like all these, I've never taken out Nat Pagal. Like it's not on my list of like cards that you can try to refine. Whereas Mana Tide is, so that kind of tells you something about it. Like Mana Tide might be, say like cards are like decks are 30 cards. Mana Tide might be somewhere between like the 25th to like 40th best card in the deck. So depending on what you feel about the rankings and how you want to change the deck, it's like sometimes you have it in, sometimes you don't. But Nat Pagal is like on a whole nother level. Like it's just always not even close to being anywhere near the 30th card. So yeah,
okay.
I mean the reason why I think is because like people talk about counters to Nat Pagal a lot, and a lot of people they never really mention like the way it's supposed to be countered, and that is just punching it with creatures. Like they're always talking about like Wrath plus hero power or that kind of things, but anytime you're kind of nuking Nat Pagal with a spell, it's not going to be efficient at all, not even close, because Nat Pagal is extremely big for a 2-drop. Yeah. I'm talking about big as in the toughness, like 4, right? Like you almost never have a 2-drop being 4 toughness where you're trying to kill it. And also Nat Pagal, even if you're killing it immediately, 50% of the time it's already going to draw the card, so you're not going to be efficient no matter what nuking Nat Pagal with spells like Swipe. wrath and stuff like that. Really, the counter to Manatide Totem and Nat Pagle is creatures because the creatures don't fight back. So that's the thing. But
That's
the
a good
reason why
point.
the cards are on a whole nother level um, is because Manatide is 3 mana and Nat Pagle is 2. And usually, like in this kind of metagame, or just in general in Hearthstone, it's really turn 2 where people start dropping a lot of creatures. So the reason why Nat Pagle is so balanced is because you you generally never have any creatures when they drop Nat Pagle. So you know what I mean? Like the number one like counter to Nat Pagle is non-existent because you don't have any
Is Nat
creatures
Pagle. It's your own Nat Pagle.
Yeah, exactly. Like if you in a 1 mana metagame, Nat Pagle was much less effective.
Yeah.
Remember the old 1 mana metagame with the Warlock Flame Imp and Mass 1 mana drop?
Right.
I mean, that's why, because the number one counter to Nat Pagle is actually creatures. It's just in the 2 mana metagame right now where most people don't have 1 drops, then Nat Pagle's just the first creature on board, and then you have to make a decision on whether to try to kill it with creatures, which is really risky because say you then drop some 2/2, 3/2s like Sun Furies or like 3/2s, and then it doesn't have haste, so then they have a chance of drawing more. What if they
Yeah.
remove your creature that you drop? Like they just
Yeah,
kill
it's the
you.
story of the meta right now, man.
And
You
then
summed it up
what
really
happens?
well.
And then your other option is try to nuke that pig with spells, but again, that's never going to be effective. And in fact, whether that's even doable most of the time is pretty doubtful as well because it's for toughness. So.
Right.
Oh, that's why it's Manatide is not on the same level because a lot of times there's already creatures on the battlefield when they drop Manatide since it's turn 3.
Mhm.
So and it's also weaker 3 toughness and stuff.
Sick explanation, Strife. That's good stuff right there, man. Hopefully you guys were able to absorb that. Any last thoughts on the Shaman deck, Trump? Anything?
That was really well said, Strife.
Yeah, that was
That
pretty sick.
said, I would be trying to find any reason to fit in 1 Manatide Totem, just because I really like that card. It's really strong against control in particular. It's really bad against aggro though. So
yeah,
like,
it's
you have that
ridiculously
balance.
strong as control.
Mhm.
Like
Exactly,
I've won so many games Shaman vs Warrior completely due to 1 Manatide Totem. Like it just brings them. If they can't kill it, they lose extremely quick because it just takes over the game. So.
Yeah, Trump, you're
And
gonna finish your thought. Oh,
sorry, and it has the same weakness, right? Like if they don't have
Just let
creatures, like
Strife talk.
Manatide if they don't have creatures, Manatide is like the same. Like it's even worse because
yeah.
they still have to nuke it with a spell, except that all his draws. So you're not going to be efficient like wrathing a Manatide either. So yeah,
Mhm.
it's
Yeah,
really
true.
strong against warrior control and stuff.
I
Trump,
agree
you
with that.
did you want to finish your thought? I mean, think.
No, that
Okay.
was good.
Okay. Okay, great. All right, why don't we move on? Those were Strife's deck. Why don't we talk a little bit about Trump's decks now? And hold on, let me change this, and we'll switch over to the Mage decks, and kind of different formatted these images. But the left one is the budget deck that Trump's been playing and trying to get to Legend. And then on the right one is not so much a budget deck. It's just generally a good Mage deck that he's been playing. And is this the exact same one you played on Fight Night, or is this a different one?
That one, if it has the Amani Berserkers, it's definitely different.
Yeah, it has Money Berserkers.
Yep, it's different.
Okay, so why don't we talk about the budget one first, since you've been playing it on stream a lot. And for those that haven't read, I guess, the explanation of it, explain why it's a budget deck, given that it has an epic and a few rares in it.
Yeah, okay, so I'm still not seeing it on the stream, but I'll see it eventually. I know off the top of my head that it's under 1,000 dust to build this deck, which
Yeah.
means
Yeah,
that
that's
I
pretty
created the account on Friday, and I've only been playing a week, and you naturally get just about that much dust. In fact, I have like a few hundred left over. Actually, I have over 400 left over. By naturally playing the game, you'll be able to build this deck. And that's even with me like crafting some things that I ended up not using just due to as I leveled up and as I played more guys, it was I refined it. So some things that are going to look pretty weird, in fact I only changed it yesterday, are the addition of 2 Arcane Explosion and the removal of the Arcane Missiles. And let's see. And of course, it doesn't have any legendaries in it.
Yeah.
And only one
No, a
epic.
1,000 does.
Although,
That's not very much. That's
right.
definitely in the budget range for sure.
So the goal of the deck is pretty simple. It's a straightforward, um, like efficient answer control deck. This is more of the control than it is a mid-range deck, I would say. And
Yep.
I would argue that this is a good counter to the mid-range control decks because it would be even greedier and it has efficient answers. So your Amani Berserker can trade up for Yetis, and that's the dream of the Amani Berserker. The Arcane Explosion is there just to deal with the massive amounts of
Aggro. Yeah, crazy aggro decks.
yeah, like the Murlocs in particular, the
Yeah.
Hunters. It's like a Flame Strike for the Hunters. It's a Flame Strike for the Murlocs, sort of. It's the Paladin aggro gets killed by it. It's incredible how good the Arcane Explosions are. Although I have only tried them for one day, and I was very skeptical on how good they would be. I imagine like they would be even better with Blood Mage Thanos. Let's see. And I even thought about running a Cobalt Geomancer. The Earthen Ring Farseers are also added to counter aggro, and the Hunters,
Mm-hmm.
which there are a lot of.
Talk about the effectiveness of the ogres, because a lot of people always associate ogres as really, really good, like one of the top cards in Arena, or really just one of the best vanilla minions in Arena. And how is it working in Construct for you?
It was on Valleytown that I think I made the comment like a few weeks ago, like, oh, if you don't have Ragnos, just put Ogre in. Was it here? It was here, right?
Yeah, I believe so. Yeah,
And then like Crypt laughed it off, and like everyone
of
was
course
like,
he did.
oh, Ogre instead of Ragnos, okay. Well, as it turns out, the Ogre is pretty good, and it's comparable to Karen. Has +2/+2 on Karen. On Ragnos, it comes out 2 mana earlier. Would I run Ragnos instead of Ogre? Probably. But it's a good replacement, and it's sufficient. It's one nice thing is against a lot of the Druid decks, which run Druid of the Claw. The Ogre one-shots the Druid of the Claw, and that's the Ogre Dream, to kill it and then survive, and then maybe
The
get
Ogre
healed by the
Dream.
Earthen Ring Farseer.
Yeah,
Ogre
that is
Smash.
pretty good. Ogre Smash. No, that's
Like,
really good. There's not many
yeah.
things I can remove it. So remove the Druid of the Claw at 6. So
There have been a lot of games where I go like turn 3 Earthen Ring Farseer or Chillwind Yeti or Water Elemental Decoy, and then just have a 3, 4, 5, 6 drop with the Ogre at the top. And if you get that curve off, then you're looking really good.
okay, really cool. Hey, your cam's frozen.
Yep.
Let's restart
Whoops.
real quick. I thought we were gonna go one whole show without it freezing, but of course not. No, it looks really solid. I mean, I've seen you play it too. It's you're gonna get to Legend hopefully today. Actually, that'd be really, really cool to see you get there today. But talk about the faceless a little bit. Like why
Oh,
why
right.
have that single faceless there?
So speaking of faceless, one thing that I would probably add into Strife Shaman deck is a faceless manipulator. It's good because you have the hard removal to go along with it. So you have the
Hex.
polymorph, and in Shaman you have the hex, and it's really nice to create mana, get their guy, which will usually be like a Cairn or a Ragnaros or Ysera or something amazing, and then you hex
Yeah.
it or you polymorph it. And
That's such a
really
big
good.
swing.
Would you guys say, generally speaking, faceless should only be used in that type of combo situation? Like when you have like a hard removal like that?
No, I use
No,
faceless
because you can
anytime
faceless
it's
your own
good.
guy also.
Yeah,
Yeah,
maybe
okay,
like
sure.
let's say they drop a card and you're pretty happy just faceless, even without the hex.
Well, I mean, including it in your deck, not so much the play. The play, of course,
Oh, I
is
see.
you can hex. Well, it was fine. Oh, your cam was
sure.
fine there, Jeff. But,
Oh, okay. I see. Okay.
Yeah.
The stream didn't catch up.
yeah, would you say that including faceless in your deck would require having that kind of cheap hard removal?
It's certainly helped out by it, and I noticed that the Druid deck stopped running faceless. That's actually a possibility too. And any deck has the hard removal with the Tink Master, really, so you get faceless Tink Master.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yes, faceless. Although that's really specific. Like in a Mage deck or a Shaman deck, you have at least 2 ways to do it with the polymorph and like
Some of
fireballs.
the most like excruciating turns I had was when I've when I played Ragnaros and they go faces BGH.
Yeah,
That's
Yeah,
kind
yeah.
of
those
worse.
those hurt so bad. And he gets that 4-2 on the board too. So
Yeah, exactly.
that's really, really painful. Okay, really cool. Yeah, and those of you definitely just try this deck out again. It's very cheap, and I think almost everybody can probably put this deck together that's played more than maybe a couple weeks or a few weeks, are likely to be able to put this together. Talk
Yeah,
about
and
to
I
a.
mean,
Oh, go ahead.
if you want to ever play control style, you're going to have 2 Azure Drakes and 2 Sunfury Protectors anyways. They're just really good cards.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, talk about the non-budget deck. The right deck
Alright,
on
so
here.
the non-budget deck over there is basically the budget deck, except instead of the Ogres, you put in Karn, you put in Karin, and you put in Sylvanas, and you put in Ragnaros. Ragnaros takes the spot of a Chillwind Yeti. Actually, right now, the budget deck has a little bit of a problem. Like, sometimes I draw both Chillwind Yetis and both Water Elementals in the start, and it really sucks because that's too many 4-drops. So it cuts one of those. One of the things I might consider changing in the non-budget deck is getting rid of the arcane missiles for the 2 arcane explosions also, since the
Really? Okay.
theory has not changed there. And finally, you got the Nat Pig on Blood Mage Thalnos. The Thalnos plus the arcane explosion I can only imagine to be awesome. One of the weaknesses of the Mage is your inability to area of effect in the early game, and
Yeah. I think for a while
Thalnos
you were
explosion.
were you running Pyromancer? Um,
Yeah, I was.
yeah. So talk to me about why you took that out versus I guess using Arcane Missile, Arcane Explosion for more of that type of purpose.
Turns out that Sunfury Protector is really important. So there's just so many 2-drops that are good. The Frostbolts seem almost necessary. So do the Imani Berserkers. And I actually think it's a mistake to run only 1 Sunfury Protector on this deck to the right. It should probably be 2. And then you have the Nat Pagel and Blood Mage Thalnos. So if you're doing that, then you can't fit in the Wild Pyromancers. So that's pretty tough, especially since I've also added an Arcane Explosion as 2s now. So the 2 slot is really heavy.
Okay.
It's still in development, also.
Yeah. Wasn't Antonidas at some point in this deck? Or no?
Yep. In fact, Gadgetzan Auctioneer was at some point in this deck as well, and the
Okay.
problem with both Gadgetzan and Antonidas is the only low-cost spells you have is Missiles and Frostbolt,
Yeah.
and that's really difficult. So I would argue that the Auctioneer, as I learned, turns out to not be good, as well
Okay.
as Antonidas.
Strife, thoughts on these or either of the decks?
Yeah, I mean, I kind of like that style of mage. Like, that's one of the play styles that I actually really enjoy. And I think that a mage deck like that, it's actually like relatively like solid. Like, it's actually playable against everything. But I feel like it doesn't really have like really great matchups. It's more like just every matchup is like decent, and I feel that it might even be like every matchup is maybe just like 48%. So it's a really solid deck, but I'm not sure like if it really is favored. Like the deck is really favored against like many of the other decks, even though it's like playable against everything. But I really do enjoy the play style of it. Like I've tried to play like a mage deck, like those kind of mage decks, like kind of I guess mage control for a long time, and if I can figure out what I really like, I'll be playing it a lot in the future as well.
So Trump, your comments on there not being a really great matchup for this is: do you think there is like? Do you think this mage deck just trumps over another deck right now, Trump style?
I actually agree with StrifeCro's assessment, and this is meant to be a generalist deck, very similar to the Druid Ancient Watcher deck. I think the Druid Ancient Watcher deck is a good example of a deck that's generally good against everything and doesn't have any awful matchups, and that's what this Mage deck is trying to do as well. And we can argue about the percentage points of how successful it is, and I would...
Oh, did we lose him?
Just a
Yeah, we lost them.
Oh, there we go. We can't really. I think we're losing Trump here. Trump, you there?
hello?
Oh, there you go. We can hear you, but it's Cam's frozen again. We kind of lost the last probably couple sentences you said there, where you'd argue that you were talking about Strife and the percentages and stuff.
Okay, so we can argue about the percentages. I'd argue that this is, even though it's in its infancy, it can compete with that StrifeCro Druid Ancient Watcher style of thought, where it's good against most decks, and with a bit of refinement, it is probably a suitable, like, counter option than the Druid.
Okay.
Like, it doesn't counter the Druid, it's very similar to the Ancient Watcher Druid style,
Okay.
is what I'm saying.
Just really solid, yeah.
Yeah, so it's a good starter, or possibly, I guess, an anchor deck type of thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
Okay.
I really like it because there's a lot of playability of it. Like it's, you run into a lot of different situations where you can play in different ways. Like it doesn't always just do the same thing all the time. Like as any mage, you can go into kind of burn style, but you can also also a control deck
Yeah.
where you can just switch modes a lot and make good decisions on when you should start going for their face,
Yeah.
stuff like that.
Well, it's kind of cool to see Sylvanas in it. I don't see Sylvanas that much anymore. So, how is Sylvanas working for you in the deck?
Well, I've been practicing the left deck more, surprisingly. Sylvanas, I think, is reasonable here. It has extra value because you can fireball your Sylvanas, and that's not actually a joke.
Yep, you can do that.
I think Sylvanas is generally solid enough to include in this control type of deck.
Okay. Good stuff.
StrifeCro disagrees because he doesn't have it in his Druid deck, but I think it's a close call.
Yeah, it's pretty close. I mean, if you do get like the death rattle, it's just always going to be efficient. I think it's just a lot of times you don't get the death rattle, so
It's just amazing. It's amazing how just one mana, or actually, okay. So how much of it not having Sylvanas in so many of the current decks is the extra mana versus just the metagame changing?
It's completely because of the extra mana. Like if it was 5 mana, it'd still be in every deck. I mean,
Yeah.
Okay.
Paying 1 mana more for a card is almost equivalent of like discarding a card every time you play it. Like if you think about the difference between Ogre Magi and Azure Drake, it's the same card except you draw a card with the Drake. Like the way that the cards are budgeted in Hearthstone, every time you add a mana, it's like basically you can either think of it as drawing a card or just discarding a card as an additional effect. Like as one option. So if you think about like just having to discard a card every time you play Sylvanas compared to the old one, it's pretty big.
By that logic, Strife, isn't Wild Growth like drawing 8 cards? If you cast it on turn 2?
I mean, it kind of similar. It's only if you actually can spend all your mana like every turn, But also, the card doesn't do anything else. So I mean, I guess it'd only be 7, but it'd be really slow.
Right, so.
Right.
Yeah.
Because the actual card, it doesn't actually have an effect like Azure Drake or something. But I guess you can compare it to like Arcane Intellect for that. Like it doesn't have another effect. I mean, that was kind of an exaggeration because of how the cards are budgeted. It's actually every 1.5 mana is generally a card, not every one. That's why people don't usually use Ogre Magi and they use Azure Drake, so it's not really a fair comparison.
Yeah.
But it is pretty, from what I noticed, it's around, if you pay 1.5 mana, you can draw a card, basically.
Yeah.
And people use the card.
All right. Well, kind of doing a time check here. I wanted to still keep at least reserve some time for some of the questions on the Reddit thread. So why don't we switch over to that? I'm gonna take a 30-second break here, and then we'll come back with questions so we can fix Trump's cam here. So we'll be right back, guys. Give us 1 second.